We're back in Ohio with Mark Meeker for part 2 of the Jurassic Whitetail Cribs, and this is insane. You get to check out some of the most recognizable bucks to ever walk the state of Ohio. I'm talking about the hole in the horn buck, the beady buck, the Kaufman buck, and so many more. There's 20 bucks here that are going to be featured with an average antler score of 241 inches, but you get to hear the stories as well. Hope you guys enjoy this. Let's get right into it. Here we go.
Hey, my name's Mark, and welcome to Jurassic Park Education Center in the Ohio Whitetail Hall of Fame. So this collection here, the Ohio Whitetail Hall of Fame, we've been collecting these antlers for the last 25, 30 years. I'm pretty excited. These are all the giants from here in Ohio. Everything's either been killed or found right here in the state of Ohio. All right, next we have the David Clenbuck, and the Clenbuck's also known as the Ohio Crab Claw Buck. And of course, you can see from his giant crab claws that he has, he's a pretty impressive deer. He was shot back in the 1980s, but this deer is one of the most recognizable deer here in Ohio. And he scored his BTR, which is the Buckmaster's, is 248 inches, and his Boone and Crockett is 242 and 3/8 inches. The next buck we have is the Joseph Rabber buck. This buck was shot in Coshocton County, and this was a really cool deer. This is one of my favorite deer here to talk to all the kids about, because this buck was shot on public land in Coshocton, Ohio. Joseph and his brother were actually, they rode their bikes down. They are Amish. They rode their bikes down to this public property, and they parked their bikes. Joseph went and sat somewhere. He's 15 years old. The only deer he's ever shot before this deer was just a spike buck. And this buck comes walking in the first half hour that he was there. Well, he shoots this deer. He went up and found his brother and told him that he shot it. Well, they wanted to continue to keep hunting squirrels and stuff up there. So what Joseph did is he went and just put leaves and sticks over top of this buck in the middle of the public hunting land. So they did that. His brother came back. They were 9 hours later after he shot this. Him and his brother came back over the hill, and his brother, he told the story. He's like, as soon as he crested the hill, all he could see was antlers sticking out of the leaves. And Joseph, the only thing he told him was it was kind of a weird looking buck. You know, this buck is a top 15 buck in Ohio. It scored 244 and 4/8 inches for Boone and Crockett, and for the BTR was 264 inches. So just an incredible buck, but it's one of those things where we can tell the kids and anybody out here, you don't have to have 500 acres to go hunt. You don't have to have a brand new shotgun. He was using a shotgun that was 50 years old, single shot. So something kind of cool just to tell the kids, get out in the woods. There's plenty of state grounds. Just get out in the woods. You never know what's going to walk by you. All right, so the next deer is the Kaufman buck, which the Kaufman buck, this was shot back in 2015, but when Dan shot this, you know, it really kind of set the deer industry on fire when he shot it, because everybody was waiting for 60 days to hear what the final score was to see if this would be a new state record or not. Dan called this the Christmas tree buck, just with all the antlers everywhere. You probably have seen this and have heard the stories, but this is also a great one compared to the Rabber buck. You know, Dan hunted this thing hard. They've saw it for 2-3 years. He put a lot of time into it to get this buck. So we can tell you that, you know, with the other bucks that, like, you just get out in the woods, you never know, and it just might be luck, but this also shows that hard work pays off. And so Dan's buck actually officially scored after the 60-day drying period at 287 inches, 87 and 5/8 inches. And we have here, this is actually his sheds on both the left side from the 2 previous years. Dan had these, and we were able to get a hold of these replicas made. So kind of just shows you, you know, the growth of it, but he's an incredible deer, and it's a pretty cool story to hear somebody that works so hard to be able to shoot something like that. So our next deer is the Dave Kopp buck, which I know if you guys have been watching Cribs and everything, the Dave Kopp buck, they've done another story on it. An absolutely incredible deer that was shot back in 16. You know, Dave shot this on his father-in-law's property, small piece of property. This was the only deer that he said he was allowed to shoot on it. Wasn't allowed to hunt usually the other previous years, but Dave shot this towards the end of the season. It's an incredible story, but it scored 273 inches for the BTR Buckmaster, and Boone and Crockett is 267, which makes this is a top 5 buck that was ever killed here in Ohio. Just incredible the mass that it has on it. It's also known as the largest unicorn buck because there is a unicorn point coming right out of the center of his head. Just a massive deer shot up in Stark County. It was over near Alliance, Ohio. So our next buck is the Brad Germain buck. And Brad shot this back in 2004. And this is actually the state record for Boone and Crockett, or the Ohio Big Buck. This is the typical record right here, which scores 201 and 1/8 Boone and Crockett. And then the BTR score is 207 and 7/8. This massive 10-pointer. I mean, he's got crazy brow tines, you know, 11, 12-inch brow tines, but just everything on him is massive. It actually is tied for the typical record with the contrast buck. It's something that's awesome that Brad shot. He said, you know, he was out there hunting for it, and I know that he went out early in the morning and hunted. I think he sat in his tree stand a couple hours before that buck even came out in the darkness waiting for him to come in. So incredible deer that was shot. It's been 18 years ago. I just feel like it wasn't shot that long ago. So this right here is the kind of the center of our wall for the Hall of Fame, but this is the infamous hole in the horn buck, which I know everybody knows about the hole in the horn buck. This buck was killed back in the 40s. They don't know exactly when it was killed, and it was in the Ravenna Arsenal up there in northeastern Ohio. This thing didn't become a legend for years. This thing sat in a bar on the wall for about 40 some years before Dick Idle, which was the creator of North American Whitetail, actually came to Ohio and found this buck. You know, of course, it's got the hole in the horn name because there's a hole right there in one of his drop tines. That's where the story, nobody ever quite knows exactly the story, but we've had everything from, I've heard that, when I first heard about the hole in the horn, it was, there was a 22 bullet that went through it. Well, I don't know if that is, but that's a story. Then I've also heard that whenever this was hanging on the wall at a bar, that they had a piece of wire that would tie up to the wall to a screw that was on the wall because the rack was so heavy it was actually about to fall over. So I don't know if I heard that they drilled a hole in that. Not sure about that. But actually about a month or so ago, we had a gentleman coming out here with his family to visit the park, and he told me that his great-grandpa was there when they found this thing. And I did hear the story that he's telling me, but he said that rack was caught underneath that chain link fence, and the deer was still alive because they think it was hit by a train. So it was off the tracks, but it was caught underneath that chain link fence, and as it was rubbing, it actually rubbed a hole, the bottom of that chain link fence rubbed that hole in it, so that's where you get the hole in the horn from. But, you know, this deer, there's some controversy with this deer when it was scored back in '83. It was scored at 343 inches for Boone and Crockett, which actually made it the #1, beating the Missouri Monarch. However, they rescored it by panel scoring it back in '86, 3 years afterwards. Its final scoring with the panel scoring is 328 inches and 2/8 inches. It makes it the #2 in the world after Missouri Monarch, but there's still a lot of people say, hey, it should be higher. It should be the #1. But whatever it is, it's an incredible deer. Awesome to be able to have in the collection. I mean, he's got 200 inches of non-typical points and just an unbelievable deer. All right, another one of our bucks we have here is the Michael Beatty buck. Mike Beatty shot this thing back in 2000, and this was, you know, this is the state non-typical record still. You know, it was one of the largest deer ever shot in the United States. It was a record at the time, which it has been broken since. Mike went out hunting for this deer, and he was out with his son. Now, you got to think back in 2000, you know, we didn't have trail cameras. We didn't know every deer that was walking on the property. So they scouted from the road, and I've got to know Mike pretty well. So hearing these stories is really cool coming from him. They had a 140, 150 inch 8-pointer that they had on their farm, and that's what they really, you know, were looking at from the stand, or I'm sorry, from the road when they were scouting. Mike went there hunting that day. Well, a doe came walking by, and as that doe came walking by, here comes that big 8-pointer. Mike actually drew back his bow, but could not get a shot at that deer. He said he finally had to let down as that thing went. He was devastated by it because that was what he said, what he told me. He's like, man, that's a buck of a lifetime. So 30 minutes later, he heard some more crashing in the brush, and here comes another deer. He thought it was that buck coming back and got all excited, got up, and then out steps this thing walking through the brush, which I could only imagine what you'd think whenever this thing was coming through. So this massive buck comes walking right up. Mike was able to make a good shot on him. He said he went to track it. They tracked it for a while, and then it started to rain. It was getting dark. Blood was kind of gone, so they went home. So Mike went home and then went back the next morning and recovered this thing only 30 yards from where he stopped at the fence. I don't know if you sleep on that. I can't sleep whenever I shoot at a 135-inch deer, let alone a 300-inch deer. But his final score, Boone and Crockett, was 304 and 6/8. And his Buckmaster's BTR was 312 and 3/8. But this was shot over in Greene County. And I mean, it's one that almost got beat by the Kaufman buck, but I'm sure one day it will get beat again, but that's going to be a hard one to top. Another buck is the James Spears buck, which was shot down near in Hamilton County, down by Cincinnati, back in 1998. And I know you guys have seen this buck before on some of the other Exodus programming and stuff, but this buck is just, I didn't realize how big he was until we got him. I mean, he's got 17-inch G2s. He's got, 14-inch G3s. Just everything about him is just crazy massive how tall he is. Now, he might not be as heavy mass-wise as some of these other ones, but just the length of his beams are just absolutely incredible. But he scored 212 and 4/8 inches on for Buckmasters. Just a pretty cool deer of just the height of something like that. I can only imagine walking through the woods seeing that. All right, our next buck, I know I'm not supposed to, you're not supposed to have favorites whenever you have a collection and stuff, but I have to say the Brian Stevens buck is one of my favorite bucks, if not my favorite. I've seen a lot of big deer when we were collecting all these, and when I met up with Brian to get this replica, he had it in the back of his car. He actually said, I have a replica. I actually even have one on a mount. And he pulled that out of the back of his truck. Like, it just seemed like that deer just got bigger and bigger the closer it got to me. It scored 232 inches on Boone and Crockett and 249 and 6/8 in the BTR Buckmasters, but you got to see the left side of this. Everything about it is just so massive. The left antler, the main beam is over 35 inches, and on the right side is 34 inches. It's 34 and an eighth. And I've told that's the largest main beams on either side. 1 and 2 is on this buck, but his left side scores 97 inches. And if you see, it's just a 4-pointer. So it's just 4 points on one side is 96 inches. So if he matched that on his other side, you know, you're looking at 194 inches plus, you know, your 24, 25 inch spread. You're looking at a 220 inch 8-pointer. It's just unbelievable deer. And to see that in person, you know, Brian was hunting with a bunch of friends with his muzzleloader, and he said they knew there was a couple big deer on the property. They did not know this deer was this big. And I mean, I remember seeing him in front of the Ohio regulations in 2010 holding that thing up, but to see it in person and to see it matched up with all the other state records, you know, this thing's not one of the, you know, it's not one of the top 5 deer here in Ohio, but you know, you're still talking it's a top 15, top 20 deer. But to me, it's like I said, it's got to be one of my favorite bucks we have in this whole collection. Here's another buck that we just I just got this in a couple months ago. It's the Ohio Mystery Buck. Now, this was found back in 1975. It was found by a rabbit hunter, but this thing is incredible, the mass that it has on it. It scored a Boone and Crockett of 288 inches. Which makes it, you know, one of the top 4 in the state of Ohio for, you know, bucks that are found or shot. But just absolutely incredible deer. I'm sure there's a couple old hunters out there that have seen him and have good stories about this giant that was walking through. But like I said, nobody shot him. They found him rabbit hunting. And, you know, another one of those things that we can tell the kids and the people, the visitors we have out here, man, just get out in the woods. You never what you're going to stumble upon. I'm pretty sure these rabbit hunters never thought they were going to walk up on a 288 inch deer. Kind of a cool deer to have here in the collection, just with the mass and everything. Really, really cool deer to see. So this buck right here is called Whiplash. This was a buck that Spook Span killed back in 2015 with his compound. He hunted it for a couple weeks. He came up here to Ohio to hunt it. He shot it over in Ross County. This thing scored BTR is 257 and 2/8 inches, but just an unbelievable deer because he's not very wide. He's pretty compact, but he's just got tines everywhere. I want to say he's only 14 inches wide. It's a really cool deer to listen to Spook tell the story about the different encounters that he had with them and everything he had to keep trying differently. A pretty awesome deer. For anybody to have. So here is the Deb Smith buck. This giant 12-pointer that Deb shot back in 1985 with the shotgun. This is actually the BTR, which is Buckmaster scoring. This is the #1 deer for the typical, or I'm sorry, for the perfect category. So this deer actually beat out Brad Germain's buck. So this is not for the Boone and Crockett Ohio Big Buck, but for the Buckmasters. This is the #1, which is just an absolutely incredible deer. I mean, everything on him is almost perfect to the other side. I mean, even the splits on the brow tines. Just a crazy symmetrical deer that they have. And like I said, it's the #1 for the perfect category for Buckmasters. So next we have the Mark Hammer buck. So Mark shot this up in Huron County with his compound back in 2014. And I've got to meet Mark since he shot this. He's a really great guy. He had a rattle box that he created, and he actually rattled this buck in during the 2014 season. And this buck is actually, so it went 254 inches BTR, 254 and 1/8 for Boone and Crockett. And this was the #1 buck that was shot in North America back in 2014. But it's because he's just got mass everywhere. His brow tines, how they curl and split. He told me the story. He's like, you know, he said he shot that thing and he couldn't stop shaking. Had to go sit at the base of the tree, and which I could only imagine if that thing walked out in the woods in front of me. But it's a really, really great deer to have here in the collection, like I said, and being the #1 for 2014. All right, so next buck is Chester Veach buck. This was shot back in 1971. So this buck shot in Pike County, Ohio, with a shotgun. Its BTR score is 288 inches and 7/8 inches, I'm sorry, and Boone and Crockett is 261 and 3/8 inches. Now, this is still the #5 deer in the state of Ohio, which, you know, of course, some of the other bucks have knocked it off because it was one of the top bucks at the time shot. Just the mass on this deer, again, the mass, even his drop tines, the amount of mass that he has on him is just incredible. And even on the backside, he's got about an 8-inch flyer on each side. But how they match is just incredible with that. Our next buck is another one of my favorites, and this is the Gott buck. So Kurt Gott shot this back in 2000. It didn't get as much attention because, of course, this was the same year that Beatty shot his buck. This thing scored for the BTR was 260 and 1/8 inches, and Boone and Crockett's 251 and 5/8. This is actually the #9 deer here in the state of Ohio for non-typical. Just a massive bucks where he's got points everywhere. When you just talk about a giant frame deer, you know, he's kind of got it all. Kurt shot this with his crossbow in early season, but like I said, it was overshadowed by the Beatty buck. So a lot of people didn't even know that he shot this the same year, but it's an incredible buck. It's a cool one to have here in the collection. So over the years, when I'm starting collecting all these, I was able to meet Adam Hayes, which, you know, a lot of people know who Adam is, you know, with the Red Moon Guide. Adam's an incredible hunter. He's been doing it for years. Very, very knowledgeable guy to sit and talk to. So I've been fortunate over the years to get to talk to him and to sit down and have dinner with him at some of the shows and everything. We are lucky enough to have all 4 of his 200-inch deer that he's killed, all with a compound bow. So I told you before that everything in here is Ohio. I did lie about one of them. On the far right side, that is Adam's 4th 200-inch deer that he shot with a compound, and that was taken in Kansas back in 2006. That one scored a BTR of 215 and an 8 and a Boone and Crockett of 219. Pretty incredible to have all those deer right here at the Hall of Fame for people to come out and see. Like I said, Adam's a great guy. Probably one of the most knowledgeable hunters I've ever met in my life. So another one of the bucks we have here is the Chuck Sukik. Shot this back in 1999. It might not be the largest frame ever. I mean, it scores 167 and an 1/8 for Buckmaster's BTR and Boone and Crockett 155 and 3/8. But this is probably the largest piebald deer that I've ever seen. Most piebalds, their racks, you know, it's a genetic disformity, and their racks aren't. You know, they're not as big, or they're lopsided, or they grow little ones. So this thing growing to be a 160-inch deer, he called me and said that he shot it, and I went out there to his house, and he said that he'd love to have it on display here at the Hall of Fame. He had trail camera pictures of it. A little bit of a stockier deer, just because that's how most piebalds and albinos kind of get, but incredible to have a rack like that. Shot just here in Belmont County, about just a half hour east here of the park.